Well, welcome Falcon fans to week 9 of the Coaches Show with Coach Reynolds and my partner here, Stephen Lyles. And boy, again, we talk about it every week, but it does seem like things are just fast forward, right? You just that fast forward, but somebody needs to get off of it because it is going very, very quick. But a great win last week over River Road.
Thank you. Yeah, the kids did well. Went out there and got the things that we talked about. Last Friday morning we got accomplished early in the game, and we're able to kind of do what we wanted to do there. So it's a good district win for us.
How big is it? We looked out there on Friday night, and man, it looked like you got a lot of players, a lot of reps. It felt like it was early, like they got real. Sometimes you get blowout reps and you're not really running your offense, but I felt like you got a lot of kids game reps last week.
Yeah, there was. Everybody got in the game and got some type of reps, offense, defense, or special teams, or all three. And it's good for those kids, to be able to get in there and get those reps, like you said, and get some confidence, because you just never know, as you get later on in the district and the playoffs, and hopefully make a deep run. You just never know who will be called upon, and the more reps those guys have, the better chance they have of coming in and doing what you need them to do.
When you get in a game like that, where obviously you're kind of dominating the overall performance of the game, and the game's going exactly how you want it to go, how do you keep that team focused on still executing and still, having fun is part of it, obviously, but how do you keep them still focused on, hey, let's make sure we still execute correctly, no matter who you bring in?
Yeah, I think that honestly, I think it takes a maturity level with the kids, to be able to execute that, do that. We talk about it, and maybe there was a couple times this year where we got up, and in the second half, I probably got a little cranky in the fourth quarter because I didn't think we did that very well. Our thing is, as coaches, we're going to expect, no matter who we put in, to try to execute what we practice every week. And we expect that from them. And I thought early on, a time or two maybe in the season, that we didn't do that, and I thought, last week our kids did a good job. Coaches had them ready. They did a good job. Another part of that is too, I see kids, this is what we want, but we see kids, some of those guys who do play all the time, when it's their turn to be on the sidelines, we want them to be the biggest cheerleaders for those guys that are in there, because they're on, they're those other guys that are watching a lot, they're the ones cheering for them, and it takes it both ways. You can't be the guy and then come on the sidelines and be turning around, staring, talking to the people in the bleachers. You got to root for your teammates, and I saw a lot of that. That was, that's something that's real encouraging. In fact, we made jokes about it. One of the biggest cheerleaders out there was Baylor King. Other than that, he was in uniform, had the cast on, but obviously didn't play. There were times, first several touchdowns where I had a question. I was like, was he on the field that play? Because we're celebrating, telling him good job, and he's out there high-fiving, and I'm sitting there second guessing, thinking, was he out there just now? So just real good to see, that happen, and guys being great teammates.
You probably had to hide Baylor's helmet so that he wasn't on the field, but
yeah, he had his helmet on, and he could have possibly been available, but anyways, he did a good job for us in helping his team, being a leader.
Obviously in some of those games it's hard to learn a lot because you look up and it's a wrap. But there was a moment there where, you're always looking at the team overcoming adversity. We talked about how they've overcome, El Paso coming back and tying it and all those things. How good was it when a couple calls didn't go our way? We ended up in as Chris would like to say, a country mile down in distance, and they came back and found a way to not only convert it, but get it back into the end zone. How good is that just to see them continue to, week after week, no matter what it is, they just find a way to overcome those little things that maybe we wouldn't have in the past?
Yeah, I think it goes back to everything we've talked, with the kids about, is just overcoming adversity and just keep pushing on. Obviously, the one that stands out in my mind is the first play of the second half where Ivan, busted for a 65, 70-yard touchdown.
That's the one.
And then they get it, they throw the flag, mark it back for an early celebration. I wasn't very happy about it, the call, but I got another 15-yard tag on top of that. So we were at second or third, actually, in your country mile that you were talking about. But I think we came back, and I think Ivan got the ball the very next play on screen and broke a tackle and ran somebody over and spun out of one. And you probably couldn't tell from where you're at, but the sidelines erupted on that play. And
Okay.
I really thought when he did that, you know, just that determination to go make a play, nobody's gonna stop me. And the sidelines erupted, and it was kind of on from there. You know, I thought we played well up to that point, but I felt like at that point when, you know, when we were able to go do that, it just kind of turned a little bit. It was like, all right, let's go now, you know. So that was good for us to overcome that for sure.
I don't think it hurt Ivan's feelings that his stat line went from 63 to 103 on one
Yeah,
drive.
exactly.
You know.
Exactly. As you go on through the season, we've talked about this a lot too, whether, you know, whatever level of sport it is, but how important is situational awareness, understanding clock, understanding down and distance, understanding where you're at in that game? How important is that for the team to understand that situational awareness?
Yeah, that's funny you say that. We talked about it again this week, you know, numerous times in practice, you know, talking about, especially in games like this, situational football, you know, when you're going to probably play a pretty tight game and against another really good team, situational football is huge. You know, special teams obviously comes into play with the offense and defense, but situational football, you know, is very important. You know, whether it's a 2-minute drill, you know, punt, return, or, you know, whatever it is, killing the clock or whatever it is, you know, those things are huge in the game. And I feel like we've been really good at that, you know, from an offensive standpoint. I feel like we've been really good at that right before half several times this year. Getting the ball less than 2. You know, we practice 2-minute drill every Thursday. And we work on, you know, getting out of bounds, killing the clock, you know, getting up on the line, getting the play called and running it, getting the field goal unit out there with no timeouts, make sure everybody's rushing, get set. We just try to put our kids in every situation possible, you know. And it's, you know, about the time you think you've covered every situation, you see something on TV on a Saturday or Sunday, and you're like, oh my gosh, we got to go over that. And there's so many, and I think it's probably impossible to go over every possible situation, but you want to have tried to cover, you know, everything you can, and we're always learning, you know. I felt like our, you know, right before half, we should have got some points out of that deal last week, and we didn't. You know, a couple of areas that we've worked on, we just didn't get executed, you know. And you know, as coaches, as players, we need to learn from that, you know, and to where that's not in a win or go home type situation in the playoffs, so they don't come back to get you. So we felt like we've been prepared and been through that situation. You know, we just had a couple of things that, you know, we didn't do right that, you know, cost us a chance probably to get at least 3 points there. So, you know, I think we've been good at it. We definitely got to get better at that.
You know, it's funny you said things you see on Saturday on TV and work on. So, being a tech guy, I know a couple weeks ago against OSU, you saw the little fair catch on the onside kick, pretty heads-up play.
Yeah.
Well, then last night, I literally made the comment, they must have watched the tech game because Shallowater in the JV game tries the same thing. It's a little high, little poot, and there he is calling a fair catch before he catches it, knowing that that's what. And so when you say that, is that one of those kind of things you saw on the Saturday you worked on, or was that just coincidence?
Yeah, you know, so yeah, I was actually, you know, saw that game when it happened. And, that was a pretty well executed play, other than the fact that it was right to the gas. So there's always little things like that, you know, that you're trying to work on. Whether it, you know, I think it was a couple of years ago in a high school game, and I think there was a team that they were up, the other team came back, and then they ended up taking a safety, and then they kicked off on the safety from the 20, but they punted it. Well, when they punted it, that's a live ball, you know. But the other team, because when the kid punted it, they're used to, well, if he punts it, ball hits the ground, just get away from it, right? But on the kickoff, it's a live ball. So the team that punted it ended up recovering it, going down and kicking a field goal and winning the game off something like that. So again, you just try to cover everything, and you hope that when you're given that situation that, you know, you execute it, and your kids have the confidence to know, hey, we've been there, we've done that. You know, we talked about the 2-point play against Wall, you know, 2 years ago. You know how, you know, we've been practicing our 2-point plays, in particular that one, since week 3. Kept it in the bag, never used it, and finally there was that opportunity, you know, and our kids just executed it because they've been there. So yeah, like I said, you see those things and you try to, you know, I'll take notes on the weekend watching the game. I'll put it on my phone or whatever as I'm watching film, and you know, you try to just think of everything you can, and hopefully, you know, your kids, you know, have been there and done that.
We're starting to inch closer to the playoffs, and we don't want to look too far ahead, but the region had some interesting games, and it's, you know, we've started listening to Sideline to Sideline, which is those guys out of East Texas. And what's interesting about them, they only cover 3A and 4A, so we hear a lot from the other regions that we wouldn't hear otherwise. There's no way we don't have that kind of reach or coverage. But Region 1 continues to be kind of their focal point for just some really, really good football in this region. So how inspiring, but how discouraging is that? I mean, when you start looking at that region, we got a tough region to get out of once we get there. And I know it's game by game, but have you started kind of peering a little bit ahead to see what those teams look like? Or
I just let you guys.
Okay.
So, I got enough things to worry about, but no, I mean, I think you know, as a coach, I think you don't have to, but you do need to start kind of prepping your mind a little bit and looking kind of how things are starting to shake out, especially before district. I don't ever look. I mean, I may see some scores every now and then just to see how things are shaking out. But as you get into district, for us, you know, being halfway through district with only 2 games left, I mean, the playoffs, round 1, all that stuff will be here before you know it. So you got to start looking at those things and how those districts are shaking out and who you could match up with, and if anything else, just for possible playoff sites. You know, who to start contacting. Well, you know, if we do this, we could play here or this team or wherever. So, you know, you start looking at those things and you know, start taking notice of some teams, and you know, because there's some. You know, there's probably 1 or 2 in the region that they've talked about that we have film on from various teams through who we played earlier in the year. Mm-hmm. You know, that you could end up matching up with later. Yeah. But you know, I would say I'd take a peek at it a little bit and just to kind of get an idea of where we're at. But you know, really for the most part, I'm just, you know, I know I'm boring saying this, but I'm really just concerned about the next game coming up. So. But you do have to prepare a little bit for that stuff.
For me, the shocker was Vernon. Not shocker, just because I think we've seen Vernon enough in the past, so it didn't necessarily shock me that they won. But I think it shocked everybody else that Vernon actually pulled off a win last week against a very, very good team, to say the least.
You know, when you talk about film, just obviously we get asked a lot, where'd the games go? Where'd the games go? Obviously, we're pulling them down. You know, so for that same reason. How soon do you begin to start trying to find some of that film? Because we know at some point we may have to face Brock or somebody like that, Whitesboro, all those teams. Do you start beginning to try to look for some of that film just so you have it in a database so you can pull it up whenever it comes time?
No, you know, you do that a game at a time, really. You know, there's, like I said, there's some, just by who you play, you know, they may have played somebody, so you have that film based off who they played. You know, but as far as trying to get film, you know, we just kind of do that. With Huddle now, you know, used to with the old VHS tapes or whatever, you know, if you wanted to get extra films on somebody, you had to ask, you had to meet them somewhere and drive halfway between here and Timbuktu, meet them at Allsup's and make those trades. But now, I mean, it's so easy, you know, just to get something if you want. So most people just trade all 10 games anyways, a lot. Now, that doesn't mean you break all 10 games down as far as putting the data in and all that, because teams change so much from week 1 to week 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever. So you don't necessarily break everything down, but if you want, you know, that's something you work out with that coach you're playing in the playoffs. But I don't really try to, you know, I'm just going to be honest with them and say, you know, tell them what I want, you know, and I'm not going to try to, and I think most other coaches are going to do the same. You don't want to try to sneak around each other's back to try to get that stuff. But again, through who you play, you may have film on somebody in your region.
Just because you already had it before.
You had it before because of somebody that you may have played week 2 or 3. You know what I mean? And who they played the week before or whatever. So you kind of get a little bit of that stuff. And for the most part, most coaches are good. I mean, if you want all 10, 11, 12 of my games, you can have them. You know, sometimes that doesn't mean. Sometimes you can watch too much, you know, too, as a coach. You know, I've definitely seen that. So, you know, most of the time with Huddle out there now, people don't do that a whole lot just because you can pretty much get what you want anyways.
Well, Coach, before we get into this week's game, talk a little bit about the games last night for all of our teams.
Yeah, so we had junior high games here. We had a combined B game with Shallowater, a 7th grade game with Shallowater, 8th grade game with Shallowater. Good night for our kids. Saw a lot of good things, encouraging things. I think the B team won pretty handily. And then 7th grade A won pretty handily, did a good job. Fun again, just watching junior high kids, because that's where you see a ton of growth from week 1 to the end.
Yeah,
you know?
that's the spot.
And then from 7th grade to 8th grade, and it's just fun watching those kids start figuring out how to execute the details that you want. Not perfect, by any means, but just watching them figure out. Here I like to always make fun of them, because usually week 1 of 7th graders every year. It's not this group, it's every year. Week 1 of 7th graders, that first game, they're wanting to lay all over the field all the time. They get thumped in the arm, and they want, and you got to kind of teach them, like, look, there's if you're injured, that's one thing, but it's a physical game. Don't lay around the field unless you're injured. Next thing you know, by week 5, 6, those kids are understanding the physicality of the game, and getting up, dragging yourself up off the field and stuff like that. So, and in 8th grade, lost a pretty close game. Really, it was 20-20 at halftime, and did a lot of good things. Really proud of those guys, that 8th grade group, because they're continuing to improve. Had some struggles early. They're doing some good things, improving, and still learning, about the game of football. So, really excited for those guys and just the improvements they're making as well. And then freshman JV went over to Shallowater. Freshman won pretty big. Talked to Coach Han a little bit about it last night. Said everything went well. And JV lost a game, with the Shallowater JV. I think it's 21-0. It was their first loss, our first loss of the season. So those things happen. And you go on the road against a good team.
Yep.
You gotta be ready to go, and hopefully we use it as a learning tool. Those guys have one more game left, so I expect them, fully expect them to come out hungry next week, against Dalhart on their last JV game, and finish the season with the win.
Obviously before we move into this week, been an interesting week in the football locker room. You talk about adversity and the things that come up. Obviously something that you never see. We were talking about it before. I don't believe, and maybe I think Coach Pearson's a better historian, but maybe we ask him, but I don't believe we've ever had a varsity game played without Coach Mayfield on the sideline. What does this week kind of look like? Do you have an update maybe on Coach Mayfield?
Yeah, sure. I told you a while ago, I'm not going to get into the details. Obviously most our kids and parents know, our football family knows, Coach Mayfield had a health issue earlier this week. Number one, just thankful, that they were able to find the issues and the problem, and hopefully get it fixed. Talked to him, went and saw him at the hospital that night. Talked to him on the phone a couple times since then, and sounded great. Sounded just like his old self, and got to go home yesterday. So definitely thinking about Coach Mayfield and his wife Michelle, and his family, his girls and his son, and just always a scary time. I think we've all been through different things like that before, and for me, and then as our football family, it just it's tough when you see that, whether it's a kid or a coach or whatever, because it is a family. And you spend, I know for me, and on behalf of the coaches, we spend so much time together. Through the year, it's they will, if somebody left or whatever, if I left or if any other coach left, you're always still going to be family. You spend too much time together and working together, that those things, it affects you. So just thankful, just thankful to the Lord for blessing him and getting that figured out, and hopefully he'll just heal and be back as soon as possible. But yeah, I think, to my knowledge, I didn't think about it till you brought it up a while ago, about I think he's been on the sidelines for every Bushland varsity football game since the beginning. So this is something different for sure, but we'll go try to get a win for him.
Yeah, I know. All three of my boys have obviously played for him, and as soon as I let them know, they were just like, please find out. Let us know, what's going on. So definitely he has made a huge impact on every single player that's come through that system. So, well, tonight, really, district championship for the most part with Shallowater coming in. They're coming off of a big win, high scoring game last week for them. So what's the week been like kind of getting ready for this? I mean, I'm sure the team knows this is their big game from a district perspective.
Yeah, we've talked all year about, not making any game bigger than the other, and I think that's my job as a coach. And that way we stay consistent through the year, and don't have those up and down weeks, and I feel like we've done that. I think we've, been able to come out and play some pretty good football for the most part, week in, week out. And, but at the same time, I can sit there and tell the kids, but if I keep doing it, I'm gonna tell them, they're gonna think it's just a bold-faced lie. They know the importance of this game.
Sure they do.
I mean, we're 2-0, they're 1-0 in district. This has no guarantees on the final district standings, but just looking at where we're at, where they're at, it probably has a pretty good, lead onto some seeding in the district. We'll obviously just have one more next week, and then we'll sit back and wait that last week and see what happens, win or lose tonight. But I think this game will go a long ways towards, seeding at the top of the district for sure. So I think our kids, I know our kids know the, importance of this game, just like every game. I know that our kids are ready and they want to win, and I just can't wait to get out there at 7 o'clock tonight.
Yep.
Obviously it's going to be a fun night. It's senior night, the chance to honor those guys that have really just spent so much time in your program. And I know we ask you all the time about the seniors. This is a senior heavy team, but how different is this week when you really get to put a spotlight on them?
Yeah, until you really sit back and think and reflect on it, it's as for these guys, I don't know, they were probably like first grade when I got here, and kind of knew them, probably some of them a little bit as elementary kids, and then they come through and I have them 5th grade PE, 6th grade PE, and so on and so forth. So, it's just the life of a coach, just seeing kids, classes come and go. I've seen this will be my 21st year, 21st class, I guess you could say, to come through, and it's just crazy to think about, and, I told them last weekend, this week, one day, I said, it's because of you guys, because of the players, and how you've made this season, and your leadership and your work ethic, and how you just get along and you just want it. It's like I told them, I said, it's kind of like that vacation you go on, and you're just having a blast, or that trip you're going, you're having a blast, and you don't want to go home, you don't want it to be over with. And I told them the same thing. I said, this is your last game here. Everything you've done and thought about all these years, and all of a sudden, this is it. Just go play, leave it all out there. That's all we can ask you to do. And this is one of the first times as you get into the season to where you start kind of get that pit in your stomach when you start thinking about, oh man, this is these guys' last game here, these seniors, and then all of a sudden, whenever the last game is, hopefully week 16 at Cowboy Stadium, it will end sometime, and we hope that's when it is. We hope we end it there, and we're happy. There's only going to be one team in 3A D1 that ends the year happy like that. We hope it's us. And whenever it does end, it's going to be tough on me as a coach, because this is a great group of kids.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, okay. I thought you were about to ask a follow-up. Usually we're pretty good about the cues. What do you expect to see from the Shallowater team coming in here tonight? Anything different? I mean, I think some different schemes maybe that you've seen this year?
Well, as far as what we've seen them on film, you never know until you get out there.
Absolutely.
Some people will have something up their sleeve, and for the most part, by this point of the season, you feel like you've been able to see most of everything as far as defensive fronts, whether it's an even front, odd front, or dim coverages, stuff like that. Sometimes people will surprise you and run some things that you haven't seen them do, and that's something we always have to expect. And they run the defense similar to a couple of other teams we played as far as the defensive front and how they line up. But as far as what they do different tonight, I don't know. We'll see. But they're good. They're sound. Defensively, they're big up front. They have some big defensive linemen. They have a big kid that's a junior that's committed to Tech to play offensive line there. They have a couple other kids, big bodies up there that play well. They're pretty athletic safeties, that run well. Offensively, they execute their offense well. Coach Davis, the offensive coordinator there, he was at Friendship for a long time. So I coached against him when I was at Hereford. And it's a lot of the same stuff, but they're not under center, doing it anymore like they used to back then. So, but they're the kind of common thing with him and that offense has always been they just execute so well. You almost say what's coming. They don't do a whole lot, but they do what they do really well. And they have solid quarterback, those big linemen, playing both ways. Good, tough running back and a receiver that's very athletic, probably one of the fastest kids that's going to be out on the field every Friday night. So, I mean, they're a good football team, respect them a lot. You can tell they're coached well, good in special teams and just, you have to earn victory when you beat those guys. So, I'm looking forward to it. This is why you play, to get to these big games like that, and that's a credit to our kids, it's a credit to their kids, for getting to this point. And it's just fun. That's what Friday nights are all about.
It's fun to see Shallowater back in our district because, and I know Jerry Thomas spent some time with DJ this week and may have passed on some Shallowater. But, I think we've grown so much as a community. Some people forget Shallowater was one of our rivals just 2 years ago, maybe 3. And so, does it feel like in the locker room because there's something about football and rivalries. I mean, we haven't had a true competitive rivalry outside of Shallowater the last couple of years until you go back almost 3 years. Did they get a little more amped up for a game like this?
I think the kids probably do. I know like we said earlier, they know it's a big game. They respect. Our kids are going to respect their kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they know they're a good football team.
Yep.
And I think that's where it comes from. It's we had some good games, a couple of good games with them. A few years ago when they were in our district, and I like you said, they've had a good program for a while, and I think when you have a program, that's when people respect you. They may not like you, or they may want that right. They may want to beat you, and that's fine. But I think there's a level of respect. Probably, speaking with Coach Vincent, the coach over there at Shallowater, great guy. Get along with him really well. There's a level of respect, I think, between the kids, probably their kids and our kids, and their staff and our staff, just because we know, what they're about, what they've done, and how good they've been this year. So I think more than anything, I think the kids know there's somewhat of a rivalry there. They haven't been in our district the last 2 years, but I think more than anything, they just know, on both sides that both programs are really good, and just probably looking forward to a fun game.
We're definitely looking forward to a fun game from our perspective as well. So Coach, kickoff 7 o'clock tonight, and we'll hopefully get going at 6:30.
I think we'll probably start earlier because you're going
we
to
do
do senior pregame, correct?
Senior night ceremony will start at 6:25 with the football players first, and then that should take. Now there's quite a few big senior class. We have 21 in football, and then by the time you do band and cheerleaders and trainers and everything else, it'll take a while, but senior ceremonies hopefully get started at 6:25, so we'll cut our pregame just a few minutes short, about 5 to 6 minutes short, and get that going, and then kick off at 7 o'clock.
So we'll start a little bit.
Pack the stands.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start a little bit early. We'll probably turn it over to Scott Rankin. You'll hear him probably do a lot of those senior introductions. That's easiest so to us and him both, so we don't have to read double scripts, and you're not hearing echo in the background of us trying to do that as well. But so we'll get that started on time, so you will be able to view that on our YouTube feed as well. And kick off at 7, like Coach said, pack the stands. We much prefer you watch us the next morning and be at the game. That's where we always prefer. So let's pack the stands, take up seating on the other side as well, right?
Let's do it.
So, hey Coach, thanks for joining us again this week. For Stephen Lyles, this is Chris Welch of Bushland Falcon Media.
Go Falcons.